Hello everyone, Shawn Kenney here playing some more Kerbal Space Program, and I've been working on a Duna mission for you guys. I was going through a little bit, there's a lot of testing procedures, so I ended up getting a little bit of a video out there earlier showing some of the earlier failures of this design. I've been sort of dialing it in a bit, maybe not exactly the most efficient, really using a lot of old parts, don't have everything quite unlocked out of the science tree, so I'm just kind of making do with what I got. These solid engine boosters are normally something I'd use maybe for the first stage, but they kind of came in handy here. It's certainly not perfect, that's for sure. You'll see when I'm trying to exit. You've got a really low periapsis, so I ended up having to burn through a little bit of the atmosphere. We're pretty high up, so it's not a huge deal, but I'm definitely fighting against a little bit of resistance. And, this is basically just trying to make like the old Poodle engine. Only have the smaller tank, so I had to stack two on top, but it more or less served the purpose. Yeah, here we are, getting out into orbit around the sun, and then I just got to figure out when I can get an intercept for Duna. Sometime around, I think I'm going to have to wait. So I end up having to wait quite a while, actually. Oh, what are we at? About 155 days into the mission. Continuing on, finally did get an intercept, so here we are. Kind of down to the using just a little bit of, kind of low on the fuel there. I just have the two tanks. I thought I'd do a bit of science while floating around in solar orbit, so I can get a little bit more science. We'll transmit some of that data, maybe get some, check out the goo, all that good stuff, crew reports, EVAs. There we go. So heading on to Duna. I wasn't quite sure. I was kind of hoping I might be able to, say, land on Duna and send a probe to Ike, but it was coming in at a pretty crazy angle here, and I was kind of concerned about the fuel left, so I decided to just give Ike a try, and managed to get, just trying to adjust the orbit a little bit, possible, try and, get something of a capture orbit, coming at a really weird angle though. So what I think I'm going to have to do here is I have a little probe on this ship, and I'm going to try dropping it on Ike, and then I can let the ship continue on, and we're going to be ending up back out in outside of the Duna sphere of influence. So we'll while we're orbiting Ike though, we'll do a little bit of science. And I was trying out the large antenna. Really all it does is end up using a lot more power than you really need to. I guess there's going to be some balancing of that in some future updates. But here we're going to send the probe off, and that's with the new the Sputnik Mark 1 that I unlocked. And surprisingly, this thing has a fair amount of get up and go. There's a good amount of delta V. I wasn't quite sure. It's one of the new small little rocket engines that I have unlocked, and I haven't really used it a whole lot, but it's for this small little probe. It's definitely proving efficient. As you can see, that's about 300 meters per second, and it only took about maybe 5 seconds or so to get that, and still have a fair amount of fuel. So coming down, Ike has a vacuum, so there's I did forget to put parachutes. I was kind of hoping to put this on Duna, but I'm going to have to redesign. I forgot to put parachutes on it. Need to add some of that. And here we are coming in for the final touchdown. I have the lights just sort of giving me an idea of how close I am. They're pointed out to maybe illuminate some more area, but since I don't have any wheels or anything on this probe, it's once I land it, it's pretty much going to be it. But I realize we're on a bit of a slope and toppled over. Okay, So, try rolling around, maybe try and orientate ourselves a little bit, but it's not exactly working. So I just close it up. I figured I try and get some science, see if I can still deploy the antenna. I figured we'd maybe collect as much data as I can and transmit it, if it at least won't be a complete wash. Since this probe wasn't going to be returning anyways, that was my, it's just going to be sending it there. And while I don't really want to sit there and spam the transmission over and over again to maximize the amount of science I can get out of it, while that is that is something you can do, I don't know. It just feels like it ruins the spirit of the game, and they've talked about how that they're going to be affecting that. They're going to be making some changes so that you can't just sort of use one type of science to maximize out a biome, to kind of prevent that farming aspect of it, which kind of makes sense. I want to send a mission out, get the data, bring it back whenever possible. This is, going to be able to provide a little bit. So it did take a long time to transmit. I did get some data, so I'm going to risk trying to be a little bit more forceful in my orientation, but I think I have it here. I just started rocking. It's just a little bit. Okay, just keep rocking back and forth. Just get enough momentum. Thankfully, Ike doesn't really have much in the way of gravity, so there we go. Nice. All right. So we can extend the legs, hopefully. It a little jumpy there. Time to tap the SAS. Just a little bit. There we go. Nice. All right. Not so bad. So, no damage. We can deploy the solar panels. All right. So we have a little science probe on Ike now that we, maybe do the occasional. I'll probably, repeat the experiments a couple times and transmit the data. I don't want to sit here and farm and just maximize it, but yeah, presumably it'd have a probe on a foreign or another stellar body, and it would be transmitting data over time, and you might lose some of that data in transmission. But yes, our first sort of permanent probe on another planet. Now, as you can see, this dish uses a lot of power, and now while some of the other, the temperature, for example, it doesn't send as much data, the accelerometer sends a lot of data, and it's using a lot of power, and so it's basically, it keeps running out of power every time it tries to send a packet, and it has to wait for the solar powers to recharge again before sending another packet. So this actually kind of takes, as you can see in the top left there, it's kind of going 60, 64%, 68%, 72%. Yeah, so we can just let that go. We now have our science probe on Ike. A little pull back. There's Duna. Unfortunately, it's just mountains are blocking on the horizon. So we can do a little bit more science while high over Ike. We're not going to land this ship. I want to try and, always want to try and make it home with our science. So we're on our way out, and we just have to make it out. There we are. Okay, so now I've got to find an intercept back to Kerbin. Doesn't look like it's going to happen in the next 6 months. 6 Duna months. It's going to be even longer. Or a year? Oh, okay, it's just going to be a long time accelerated trip waiting for some intercept. So finally, we still don't quite have it. There we go. Finally found an intercept. Yeah, so we've been floating around in the Duna, around the orbit of Duna, around the sun for quite a while. I think a year and a half. What's our clock up to now? 608 days? Yeah, it's been progressing slowly. There's a whole lot of time accelerated waiting going on. Finally get our intercept though. There we go. Now, once again, coming in at slightly weird angle, but that's okay. Burning the last little bit of fuel left in those side tanks. Now, I'm surprised this little craft has done fairly well, getting so quite far. I did end up removing the extra engines. As people have rightly pointed out, it's kind of a wasted weight. I don't really need. It's a little more efficient just to spend a little bit more time burning just the one engine. And finally got a periapsis down to about 54 kilometers. So, and with about 3-4 liters of fuel left, this is going to be a long air brake maneuver. I'm not even sure how many orbits this is going to take, but it basically, even though I'm very low on fuel, I know I'm going to make it back to Kerbin eventually. Oh, so eventually it's going to, as you can see, it's going to take a little bit of time, just to time accelerate around these long apoapsis, but it does, slow things down, because once you get into the atmosphere, you got to use the slower time acceleration. I think you're maxed out about at 4 times acceleration at that point, and let's see, you whip around fairly quickly, and then into the atmosphere, and I think about losing about 150 to 200,000 kilometers off my apoapsis each orbit. And so with the orbit being several million, it took a couple hours. So I'm just going to cut that out, and we're finally down. As you can see, the apoapsis is going to drop below 70, and there we have it. We are now in death spiral mode. Once again, I only have about 4 liters of fuel. I'm kind of hoping I'm going to try and use that to decelerate myself slightly when we're coming down, so that the pod doesn't get pulled apart when I deploy my parachutes. That's the hope anyways. It's really not a whole lot of fuel. I know I'm going to make it back. I'd really like to make it back with all my scientific experiments intact. That would be the ideal situation. But as you can see, I really don't have much fuel to say in the matter. But we are going to make it back. We're in final death spiral mode. Where I'm going to land, I'm not entirely sure. Surprisingly, it may be kind of close to the Kerbal Space Center. As you can see, it just so happened that my orbit is lined up with the Kerbal Space Center, and more or less, at least the continent, peninsula that it's on. At least somewhere in the middle there, I'm thinking. But it all really depends on how quickly the atmosphere slows me down. And since my apoapsis, I'm never dipping up out of the atmosphere at this point. I know this is my final orbit, but it's really hard to say where that will end up leaving me. So, as you can see, yeah, kind of going right over the mountains that are to the west of the Kerbal Space Center. I didn't really hang on there very long. But, it's at this point, it's sort of been waiting for the inevitable. I want to get as much science as I can back. We've had our first pass-by of Duna. Sorted out some of our staging issues. I still think there's a little bit more work to be done. Obviously, the solid rocket boosters for that middle stage is not exactly the best. Maybe we'll get enough science to unlock some better parts, though. Having to get fairly creative with those bottom booster stages, because I only have the smaller tanks, smaller engines, so I need multiples of them and multiples of bundles of them. And the more parts you start getting into your ship, especially the more high-powered boosters you start adding, they start adding a whole lot of forces on your ship in directions that you may not necessarily account for. Now we're coming up over these really nice-looking mountains. I forget exactly what update. It was a couple updates ago when they redid Kerbin and gave it all these nice textures, and it really gave that sense of a topography. So as you're coming over space, you can see along the horizon different, different mountains poking up. I never cease to amaze just how fluid that transition is from seeing, a little planet somewhere in the horizon, and as you get closer and closer, the detail just really pops. So yeah, it's hard to say. We're gonna maybe in the ocean just to the south of. I don't know. I think we maybe landing near those mountains. That could be a little dangerous. I'm not quite sure what the atmosphere density's like around those, at higher altitudes. It's much easier to land on land that's at least near sea level. At least the altimeter will give you a better idea of what's happening, because it will not take into account the actual elevation of the terrain. There is, if you're in the IVA mode, as in, flying it from the view of the Kerbal, there is the radar. Apparently, I haven't really used it, so I couldn't advise very much on that. I pretty much have to go by what the altimeter on the top of the screen here is saying. About 37 clicks up and slowly descending. Slowly, we're gonna do it eventually. Once we hit that thicker atmosphere, things will start happening just a little bit faster, and sometimes a little too fast. We have over 2,000 meters just per second that we have to bleed off, and yeah, it could be very, very interesting. Usually, returning pods, I pretty much usually only design my ships to return just the capsule, or at the very most, maybe a little bit of fuel, a small little tank that maybe gets it there. But this is, with the addition of the science, now we want to recover a lot more of the ship, and that's definitely made ship design all that much more interesting, because whereas normally a mission like this, I might send it all out, but I'd leave pretty much all of it in the transit, and I would just be trying to get just the capsule pod back to Kerbin. And so having to return the science bay and the goo canisters and all the other sensors, now that they're all loaded up full of data, I want to return that to get the maximum amount of science. So it's definitely been a learning curve. So as you can see, I'm going to use the old asbestos parachutes because I am kind of concerned that we're not slowing down fast enough. Yeah, and in the gameplay, hey, the parachutes don't get burned up, so until they change it, I guess I can use that mechanic. We're about 13 kilometers up. We're going to start hitting the thicker atmosphere. We're slowing down, but I fear we're not slowing down fast enough. I'm going to turn the SAS off just so that we're hanging. Otherwise, it'll try and hold us at like this, kind of crazy angle, and it does start developing a bit of a wobble. And we're basically unpowered at this point. I'm going to try using the last little bit of fuel to bring us down. And as I feared, still a little too hot. I wanted to get that under 100 meters per second. Where those chutes are, I'm not quite sure when they're going to deploy. The atmosphere is definitely getting thicker. Usually it's about 500 meters, but no. Obviously over higher terrain, the parachutes will deploy a little bit higher. So, oh, my science, no. Oh, well, alright, I mean, Jeb's okay, so, there's a plus to that. Maybe what I need is some more parachutes. More parachutes? I'll do a little time acceleration, but, you don't want to time accelerate at the point when you're your ship's coming down by parachute, and it actually touches the ground because I've had the pods destroy themselves because I had it time accelerated, and yeah, and nothing. Oh, the only thing that survived were a couple landing legs. That's a shame. All that awesome science. I still have my crew reports, and I have a bunch of reports that I filed in transit, so I mean it's not a complete wash, but man, that's disappointing. We had some really good science in those science bays, in the goo canisters. Well, I guess we can take a surface sample. It's not a whole lot, but we'll salvage what we can. An EVA report, and we might as well plant a flag since we didn't actually land anywhere else. We'll add a flag here in honor of my poor data. No, so sad. All right, well, I mean, at least it's not a complete wash. We managed to get Jeb safely back. It was kind of a touch-and-go launch. After many failed previous launches, we just might, we'll get some science out of it anyways. Alright, I think I got pretty much all I can. I'm starting to just get like fractions of one science, so might as well go and recover. So, 99 science on this mission. So it's not calculating, it's not adding in this screen all the data that I transmitted. Probably because I've saved and gone back since I played this in a couple sessions, just due to the length of time. So I figured we'd get a few upgrades. Oh, we have the nuclear. Don't have enough for nuclear engines, so we're gonna have to get some more science done. What do we have here? Some docks. Yes, different separatrons. There's some flight controls, aerodynamics. Landing. Oh, rover wheels. Rover wheels would be good. Precision engineering. I think I'm gonna get. Yeah, let's get some of these lower tiers. Maybe they're gonna unlock some further parts. Yeah, like aerodynamics. I mean, not that I'm going to be using necessarily going to be using a whole lot of parts from either of these packs. I'm kind of using them to upgrade other and explore other avenues in science here. So we have a few options. I'm Shawn Kenney playing Kerbal Space Program. Thanks for watching. So long for now.